everybody. I'm Katy Dammers, an artistic producer here at Fringe Arts, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. You're here at one of our TrailOff launch talks. TrailOff is an incredible piece that's in the Fringe Festival, and today we're speaking with some of the writers, creators, and performers who together crafted this collaborative work. Today we're going to be speaking with Jacob Camacho, Trinity Norwood, and have some exciting performances by Ty Dancing Wolf Ellis. Before we get started, I want to tell you all a little bit about the Fringe Festival this year, which, given so many things in our world right now, is primarily digital. It's a new hybrid festival of live and digital work. We really appreciate you all joining us tonight and want to encourage you to also tell your friends. We're doing a number of these launch talks throughout the run of the festival, which goes through the first weekend of October. And one good thing about being digital is that space is no boundary anymore. So your friends who are in Texas, your friends who are in London, your friends who are in Australia, all can join us. So we hope that you'll help us spread the word. We also appreciate everyone's support of Fringe Arts, particularly in these tough times, and so encourage you to consider a membership or gifting one to some of your friends who might be here in the Philadelphia area or beyond. Before we get started, I just want to orient everybody to this online discussion, which is happening via Zoom. I can only imagine everyone here is a Zoom expert, given what we've gone through in the last couple of months. But just in case you're not, we ask that you turn off your video and your mic, unless you're a presenter, for the duration of the program, unless you're asking a question at the end. Those buttons can be found at the bottom of your screen on the left-hand side in your toolbar, and you'll want to turn your video and your mic off. We are recording tonight's presentation and we'll be posting it to our website thereafter. So just know that that's happening as well. And we'll have an opportunity for some questions at the end. So if something comes up and you want some more information about it, just hold on to that and we'll get to that at the end of our presentation. As I mentioned before, today's TrailOff is in collaboration, today's talk about TrailOff is in collaboration with this app, which is a large-scale collaborative project by Swim Pony, the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, Toaster Lab, and Michael Kiley, who did much of the sound design. This exciting piece is a transmedial audio storytelling experience that you access with your body and your mobile phone. You can download the app and then head to one of the many circuit trails in the Philadelphia area, and then listen to a geolocated story that unfolds through your headphones as you walk the trail. The TrailOff app will be launching later next week on Tuesday, September 16th. And so we hope you'll download the app and experience some of the stories. But in the meantime, we're excited to give you a little bit of a sneak peek as we hear a little bit more from the authors today. So to begin, I'm really excited that Ty Dancing Wolf Ellis will start us off with a performance, and then we'll have a land acknowledgement from Trinity. Thank you so much, Ty. That was great. I know it can feel so strange to perform in this Zoom environment. You can't hear all of our resounding applause, but that was really wonderful. Thank you. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that song, particularly for people who are joining us who might not have heard a song like that before or been to a powwow.
Sure. So typically when we have powwows or programs, that song is more appropriate for an honor song, which is kind of what starts our powwow off after grand entry and all the dancers are already in. We kind of take a moment of silence and give thanks. Actually, the words in that's Patamase Wekeme, which is Creator Dance With Me, I believe. These songs kind of hold our language, so sometimes it gets forgotten. Um, but I also use it in the sense of a calling song. It's also kind of used to call everybody at attention before things get started. As I was mentioning earlier, prior to this video, sometimes when we're at powwows or programs, uh, people who are getting dressed or getting ready can't hear the person on the mic, but they can definitely hear the vibration and the echoing of the drums that are playing, which is why it's called calling song. So it's calling all those people to, you know, the time's almost ready, so you got to finish tying up your regalia and get out here. So.
Thank you. That was the perfect way to call us all in to this program today. So thanks so much. And Trinity is now going to offer a land acknowledgement.
Alrighty, so I'm going to do a land acknowledgement for where Fringe is based and where most of us are, I'm going to assume, in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. But anybody who is not living in this area, I would encourage you to take a little time and do a little research and find out, you know, whose tribal community you are by, and reach out to them about learning more about their land and the history of it. So the land upon which we gather is part of the traditional territory of the Lenni-Lenape, called Lenape-Hoking. The Lenape people lived in harmony with one another upon this territory for thousands of years. During the colonial era and early federal period, many were removed west and north, but some also remain among the continuing historical tribal communities of the region: the Nanticoke Lenni-Lenape Tribal Nation, the Ramapo Lenape Nation, the Powhatan Lenape Nation, the Nanticoke Nation, and the Lenape of Cheswold, Delaware. We acknowledge the Lenni-Lenape as the original people of this land and their continuing relationship with the territory. In our acknowledgement of the continued presence of the Lenape people in their homeland, we affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tanneman that there be harmony between the indigenous people of this land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine. Wanishi.
Thank you so much, Trinity. My colleague Zach has also just put in the chat for everybody joining us on Zoom. This is just one way to begin that history process and that relationship building that Trinity talked about. So if you're joining us from a place that is not in the Pennsylvania or New Jersey region, this can help orient you to the indigenous people who were first and continue to be on that land. So to get started, I want to do some brief introductions of the great panelists we have with us today, and then we'll launch into some discussion. So first off, I want to introduce Jacob. Jacob, can you do a little wave for us? Awesome. Jacob was born and raised in Gihan, Islas Marinas, and Jacob is a Chamorro writer, educator, and activist. He received his creative writing MFA from Rutgers University, Camden, and is also an alumni of the University of Guam and UCLA's Extension Writers Program. Currently, he's a lead teacher at All Things Are Possible Foundation in Willingboro, New Jersey, and lead educator for the Move Mountains Project in San Luis, Colorado. Trinity Norwood is a citizen of the Nanticoke Lenni-Lenape Indian tribe and a citizen of the United States. The Morristown resident, although Trinity, I'm not sure if you're still living there, but maybe you can correct me, is also a dancer and activist and a tribal princess. And Ty, who opened our program today, is part of the Red Blanket Singers, a Native American drum and dance group representing the Nanticoke, Lenape, Haliwa Saponi, and Mohawk tribes. So thank you all for joining us today. To begin, I wonder if Jacob and Trinity can tell us a little bit about the creative process for this story. This particular trail is located at the Kensington Tacony Trail point and moves along what is now known as the Delaware River. And the river is a significant part of this story. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you chose this site and then what your process was of working with the land to craft the story.
Oh, after you, Jacob. Also,
okay.
Yeah.
First, I want to say thank you again, right, to everyone who has contributed to this project. Me as, because I'm indigenous to Guahan Islam Marianas, right, West Pacific, I can relate to some issues, yeah. And as an indigenous person to the islands, I know very closely and very strongly what's it like to be misrepresented and to have your culture exploited and abused and appropriated. It goes on and on and on. So when I heard about this opportunity, I'm not indigenous to this area yet, but I wanted to use myself and my skills more of as a vessel, you know, because I recognize, you know, the history of oppression. I recognize the history of emotions and all these things that come with it. So I want to be more of a vessel, you know. I don't see myself as how can I say? I don't see myself as anything special, man. I see myself just like I've been given these tools by my ancestors, by God. So I'm thinking, how can I best share that, right? So, yeah. Trinity, would you like to add to that?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, Jacob invited me to, I would say, consult. And, you know, it was his amazing idea, and it was an honor, and it was so special to me that you recognize the importance of reaching out to the Lenape community and making sure that the story honored the people. And the location is very significant because, you know, the Delaware River, our people lived in all along the Delaware River in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and even some parts of New York. And, you know, the importance of water, it brings life, it brings sustenance. So being able to walk along that trail and be where, you know, our ancestors lived, loved, and died, it is hallowed ground, and it's very emotionally charging for me.
Yeah, in the story, you describe the river as the river of my history. So for those of you who haven't experienced the trail yet, we'll all get to experience it next week. It's a first-person account. So the person who narrates the story is as though he is walking the same trail path as anyone who's listening to the story is. And the river is described as the river of my history, which I think gets a lot to what you're saying, Trinity. And as the protagonist walks down the river path, they experience, you know, an interaction with a Lenape person of the past, a Lenape person of the present, and also one of the future. So envisioning what that space might look like in 50 or 100 years from now. And I think getting that sense of time as deep and long is really helpful for people for whom particularly they don't have this understanding or relationship with the Indigenous history. So I wonder if the two of you can talk a little bit about the practice or the research experience of learning those stories of the past, meeting with the Indigenous elders who continue to be here today, and then thinking about what it might be in the future.
Jacob, after you.
I think for me, when I was going in, I wanted to go in uneducated at first, right? Just so I can have that knowledge or experience of folks who, you know, just don't know. And then yeah, through the grace, through the grace of Trinity's ancestors and mine, like we connected, you know. And when we had our conversation, I was like, yo, like we gotta do this, you know, this gotta happen. You know what I mean? Because like I wanna say this, man, I was mad frustrated when I got started, like researching into this project. I was like a reporter going out to like these corner stores, to these businesses, along the river, and I was getting frustrated because 10 times out of 10, right? Whenever folks would tell me history about the river, they only tell me like the colonial history. They only tell me like the white history, you know? And I was like, yeah, cute story, bro. I want to hear real history. You know what I mean? And as an Indigenous person, again, I'm like, I need to find, you know, I need to find the right voices. I need to find the people of the land, you know? So, yeah, I don't know how to explain it. I can be a big nerd. My words can be corny sometimes, but I say it again, man. Like Trinity's ancestors, my ancestors, I feel like they were just chilling and just watching us from afar. And they're like, look, there he goes right there. There he goes. Oh, there she goes right there. There she goes. Oh, we're gonna connect them. No, give us some time. Give us some time. Give us some time. You know. So there's that, and I recognize how precious water is. You know, I come from an island that's like 15 miles long. You know, 2 miles wide at its narrowest point, surrounded by thousands of miles of ocean. So when I came here, I recognize the ancestors of the land definitely, right? Definitely have history with this. And that's why I was so, even though I'm not from this land, I'm not part of this land, it still angered me because everywhere I went, people were connecting me to historians that covered like the mansions like along that river, you know, that, oh yeah, this mansion was built in such and such and such and such. And whenever I would bring up the Lenni-Lenape, right? These white historians, and I'm just stating facts, right? And I keep it real, man. You know, I'm a professor at Stockton University right now, so you can ask my students. I keep it real, you know. So when these historians would tell me, and I would ask them about the Lenni-Lenape, right? I'd be like, they'll always give me, oh, that's what you want to talk about. Like that's the tone, that's their narrative, you know. So I recognize how rage is ancestral, right? So I was like, man, I need to get connected, man. So meeting Trinity is a huge blessing. Yeah, Trinity, it's a huge blessing, Trinity. You know, Ty, it's a huge blessing, my brother. You know, so I am hugely, abundantly honored and definitely humbled. You know, so when it came time to editing the stories, and folks who are Lenni-Lenape wanted to work on it, they're like, Jake, do you want to say anything? I'm like, no. You know, I'm not enough. What do you want me to say, right? Like, vessel, right? Use me. Yeah, man. So, Trinity.
When you mentioned about feeling like it was just like a surge, our ancestors and everything, us getting together, that was the first thing that came to mind, Katie, when you asked the question, because I think that us being able to be together and, work out this story is a prime example of, generations being impacted by a thing. You know, I felt it. I felt the connection between me and you because I felt the connection between our ancestors and what this would do for future generations. This is an app. It is. We're in the digital world. It's going to be there, and we don't know who. What young person it could affect, in such a positive way, somebody trying to find their way with Indigenous ancestry, or someone who is non-Indigenous but wants to be an ally to the community. So I think, just us getting together and being able to create this is an example of the past, present, and future all coming together. And I apologize for my dog.
Oh my God.
The minute we started recording.
No,
I couldn't get him off the couch.
No, I think that in a small way is like the one saving grace of Zoom. Like I miss being in a room together and hearing each other breathe and feeling each other in the space. And at least your dog reminds us that like we are here together and things happen. Great. Trinity, I wonder if you can help with some of this like relationship building and knowing that history, because Jacob, I so feel what you're saying. You know, Philly is a city that prides itself on its colonial history, which was a history of great genocide and violence. And that part of it is not talked about so much. And where Fringe Arts is also located on the Delaware River, a bit further south of this trail path, but close to a very important Lenni-Lenape site, which was a huge site of many people who lived there, particularly when William Penn and others first arrived to this site in the 1700s. And one of the only things, if you look along the riverfront for a series of signs, talks about what was called the walking purchase, which was done in the early 1730s, I think 1734, by Chief Tamamend from the Lenni-Lenape tribe, and was a site of great corruption and dispute, and led to much of the Lenni-Lenape tribe moving off of the land and being forcibly displaced and thieved. And Trinity, you actually included some quotes from Chief Tamamend in the land acknowledgement that you shared. So I wonder if you can just give a little bit of that backstory for folks for whom they might not have connected those historical pieces.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, we are in the, and Ty, feel free to chime in whenever. We are in the ancestral lands of the Lenape people, and we had a working relationship with William Penn. And actually, if anybody's ever been to Penn Treaty Park, a pretty popular park that is actually, it is known to our people as Shakamaxon, and it is where we had a treaty with William Penn that was, for the most part, you know, successful. And we worked well with Penn, unfortunately, not so much with his sons, AKA the Walking Purchase. But if you go to Penn Treaty Park, there are some placards and some monuments that do recognize what happened there. But unfortunately, we live in a world that, you know, the victors tell history. And when you decimate a culture, it's very easy to manipulate and ignore the things that happened. And so, you know, I encourage anyone who is a history enthusiast or just someone who wants to know about where they're living, it is so important that you you recognize that here in America, most history doesn't start until things were colonized. And you know, anywhere you go in the Americas, there is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of history before that that is still alive and still very vibrant. And you know, when we're still here as a community. So there are plenty of references online to get more details into that. And I know we have some Q&A later, so if somebody has a specific detail, I will do my best to answer it. I always like to say, I'm not a historian. I'm not gonna lie to you. I am more than happy to just say, I don't know.
We need help for our fathers. Well, your father, my father.
Right, I said, but I know somebody who probably does know and I can get an answer.
Thank you, Trinity. I really appreciate that. And that quote you included in the land acknowledgement, as long as the creeks and the rivers flow and the sun and moon and stars endure, I think is super powerful and is included on one of the few Indigenous crafted monuments along the Delaware River. So I encourage people to check that out as well. But I think one of the biggest themes of this story more broadly is the practice of rewriting those dominant narratives. As Trinity said, the victor usually writes history, which is only one side of the story. And so much of this story that you collaboratively created is about crafting an alternative, and I would even say a corrective narrative for the land and for the people to consider a different future for themselves. And so Ty and Trinity, I wonder if the two of you can speak in particular about what it felt like to craft a narrative in that way, in a way that might be alternative or different from what you usually see, and how you drew on your Indigenous heritage to make that possible.
Ladies first.
Thank you, sir. I would say it is cathartic. That is the best way I can describe it. You know, as an Indigenous person, you oftentimes find yourself being erased in a room you are currently sitting in, and it is difficult to balance You know, Jacob was talking about that rage you feel. You feel angry, but you also feel like you have to represent an entire community of Indigenous people. So I can't act crazy, but I'm feeling that erasure. So to be able to share my culture in a new and creative way, and be able to meet, you know, share my culture and be able to meet with Jacob's ideas and his culture was just absolutely cathartic.
You know, I agree. For one, the concept of this whole thing in general is just amazing, and you know, I think sometimes we often forget because you know our parents and our grandparents come from a time where we had to hide up until the civil acts in the 70s. We had to hide who we were. So we went we transitioned from a time where people would say they don't exist anymore to now we're in a time where we would receive so much help and support from people who aren't our own. So for one, like I thank Jacob for you know the feelings he had and how much he felt he needed to help us on our land. I mean, I want to say that's something that is very rare to find around here, but I think at the same time, it's like I personally would possibly be surprised to see how many people would reach out their hands in that way to help us. And this is kind of just like the start. And I'm just like, me, myself, you know, both Trinity and I, we both kind of deal with a lot of programs, and we're like in that odd stage in our lives where we are doing everything ourselves, you know, and we feel it's like if we don't do it, it's not getting done. So to have other people do things for us is just way out there. So I'm very appreciative of this whole opportunity, and I'm glad I was able to be a part of it.
I just wanted to say, Ty, you mentioned, you know, being able to come together and somebody else share our story. And the previous question was about, you know, rewriting the history books. You know, bridges like this allow the narrative to change. You know, we can't go back and change what has been done. We can't. I don't know at what point in time in our history books will actually start writing things correctly, but there are things that we can do, you know, in our lifetimes right now. And it is stuff like this that creates those bridges that changes things and changes people.
In addition, we do this a lot, sorry. We do this a whole lot. You know, in addition, and I also mentioned kind of how we went from that transition of us not existing. I mean, we would be children. There was a time when we were children and we were in schools being told by our history professors or teachers rather that we don't exist. And we've had plenty of our youth that had to argue with their teachers and then get their parents involved. And, you know, now we're at a point in time where we've been given so many platforms to kind of set the record straight. And people are kind of opening their eyes, becoming woke to how media and history books are kind of very one-way or singular perspective. That we now have teachers like, please tell us more, please educate the class. And it's just like that in itself is just very promising for, you know, doing away with some of that, you know, blood on the leaves. So.
Yeah, I think we are seeing some change, small, but I hope it will become more and more steady. And I want to say Fringe Arts is thrilled to be partnering with you all in this way, to be a small service in helping to be an ally in that way. I appreciate really how you articulated, Trinity, that it's your history, but that you're seeking for others to help you carry that forward. That's a great way to describe how someone can be an ally to the Indigenous community. I think so much, Ty and Trinity, of you saying, you know, we're still here, you know, we have not been eradicated. You know, the Lenni-Lenape continue to exist here and in other places around the country. And that is so crucial to remember. And I think one thing that helps to keep that erroneous story going also has to deal with our understanding of the land. You know, so often positive images of nature feature empty forests or like places devoid of humans, as though humans couldn't have a positive relationship with the land, as humans have in fact ruined the land. And in many ways, humans have not done good things. But by seeing land as only being in a positive state without the human, completely erases the Indigenous history of generations upon generations of a really wonderful symbiotic relationship with Indigenous people and the land. And I think that's something that so often people don't connect in their brains. And this story does a really great job of bringing those parts together and also perhaps looking to a future where it could be like that again. So I wonder if all of you can talk a little bit about how your story is connected to the land and what it was like to create a story that in this TrailOff app is so specifically related to the movement along the river and what people can see and feel as they take that walk themselves.
Don't everybody jump in at once. Okay.
Jacob, why don't you go first?
All right. Could you repeat the question just one more time?
Yeah, I have to say it was like a lengthy thing. I'm just talking too much. But I think broadly, like let's talk together about the relationship between the land and the story and the land and humans. You know, one thing that's great about the app is that the person who's experiencing it is walking that same landscape about which you all crafted this story. So what was it like to create a story that was related very specifically to geography? And how did you do that?
Okay. For me, I knew, right? And I know historically all around the world, no matter what culture is on this particular land, right? That people gravitate towards water. Yeah. That I said it again, right? Water is life, agua es vida, right? So I feel like, and especially given now our current times, how easy it is for us to access information, especially how spoiled we can be and how fast we want that information, right? I knew that if these stories stick by the water and they, they'll evolve, they'll change as many things do in time, I knew that folks would gravitate towards this, right? Curious ears would want to hit play and like listen, So, so I knew that with this privilege that I had in this position in TrailOff, it's imperative, right? I have to connect with the Lenni-Lenape and I cannot make, wait, hold on, let me rephrase that. I cannot be a part of something like this and ignore the people. That's colonialism 101 continued. That's oppression continued. That's abuse continued. And I wanted to, I just wanted to be, man, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I just want to be present, I just want to be present. And I recognize the sense of urgency. I recognize the risk, I think Trinity, Ty, we can understand and we can relate with one another when I say like we are tired of people saying we're dead. We are tired of people misrepresenting, exploiting, appropriating, and it's for me growing up, those words always got me into fights, right? Because folks were never interested in hearing it. And I feel like that's a product of colonialism, right? Like we start to become white-minded, we start to feel inferior towards one another. But that's how the colonizers kill us off, man. Get us to kill one another. You know what I mean? And I feel now in 2020, when everyone is so like, not everyone, but when certain people are like so woke now, it's like this brand new phase. It's this brand new facade. I'm like, nah, man, this is life, bro. I'm glad that you could hop on the train and be part of this cool crowd and then go back to your life of privilege afterwards. But nah, we ain't in that. We were born into that, So I feel like See, I'm just getting myself angry again. Yeah, rage is ancestral, man. Trinity, Ty, hop in, man.
Well, I want to say, when you talked about the importance of concentrating on water in the story, because all nations of all generations congregate to the water, it made my heart flutter, because that is so deep. You know, no matter where we are from, you know, our ancestors, water is life. Our ancestors congregated to the water. So this is a tool that will bring people back to that root. And I hope that as people listen and walk, it realigns and balances them to that. We get so distracted and fragmented ourselves in life, trying to do so many things. It is so important to realign and rebalance. And at the base of that is water, because water is life. And yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh, preach. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
I personally don't have much to say because I had nothing to do with the actual story of the TrailOff project. I was just the music, you know. But you know, like I said, I'm still glad to be a part of it. I apologize, I make it a little loud in the back. My youngest daughter just woke up from her nap and now it's dinner time. 25 seconds, please. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So, and actually, I began to listen to the story myself, and I kind of stopped on purpose because I want to be able to do, you know, I want to be able to go through it and hear it for the first time while doing the trail itself. So I kind of like skipped to where I was like, I was impressed with what they did with what I had given them. So, but I kind of got bits and pieces of the first 15 minutes, and then I listened to kind of the end. And, you know, Jacob was talking about those kind of the ancestors, kind of our ancestors speaking to one another. And it's kind of funny because it's like we collectively have the same ideas. Like I've had this concept in my brain for I don't know how long of kind of stepping into the past, you know, going to a monument or something and stepping into the past and kind of seeing it in perspective of the people who lived there at that time. Very Assassin's Creed-ish or something such as. And I've always fantasized about making a video game or a story or something that kind of explored that more. Whether it be you go to a sweat or you go to the circle and you just kind of get transported into the shoes or moccasins rather of your ancestors. And this kind of gives me that feel. So, and that's what I get from it. So I think that, I mean, yeah, that's that. That's all I have to say about that.
Oh, could I say something real quick off of what Ty just said? Whether it's literature, whether it's in media, right? Whenever the other, when I say the other, I mean like the race that just isn't white, right? Whenever the other is brought up in these stories of time traveling to the future, to the past, there's always like a trope, you know? There's always like a certain character that fills this trope, right? Like, oh, there's this wise old woman, you know? Oh, there's this poor old man, right? Like they all fit these roles. And within that racism, there's like a checklist, and they're only used for convenience, you know? Like objects of convenience. And I definitely didn't want the stories to be like that, right? So in chopping it up with Trinity in these conversations, and you know, also with myself, right? I was like, man, I wanted to do my best to disrupt that discourse, you know? I wanted to tell the stories naturally, right? Like, you mentioned Assassin's Creed, yeah? It made me think, this is how my mind works, I'm sorry. It made me think of like the movie Matrix, you know? Like it has that oracle. I don't know if anyone's seen the Matrix, but you can Google it after, whatever, right? But you know, there's that oracle, this is wise old black woman, and she's only used for convenience. You don't really get to see her arc, you know? She's only there as like, oh yeah, you know, these things, and it's a trope, man. And that's racism 101, you know what I mean? So that's what I mean by, you know, it's imperative to have proper representation, to tell these stories naturally, right? So in writing these stories, That's all I thought about. I was like, man, if I really had the privilege, right, to chop it up with the ancestors of the land, you know, what would that be like? You know, what would they be feeling? What would they be thinking? So, yeah, yeah, Ty, man, you feeding me. You are filling my cup, bro.
Yeah, Red Bull in it, right?
Yeah, man, good stuff, bro. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Mm. It's been a really rich discussion. Thank you so much, you all. I'm going to ask one final question to kind of begin to wrap up this section, and then we'll go into some audience Q&A. But very much following off of what you were just saying, Jacob, you know, there's one quote that really stood out to me in this story, which it actually is at the beginning of the trail. And the main character asks, what does it mean to be free? And I think that's one of the central questions of the story, you know, pushing back against the Indigenous person or the other as the trope, you know, what would it mean to truly be free, to be the main character of the story? So I wonder if each of you can just say a little bit of, in what ways do you hope the story might orient people differently towards notions of freedom? Or what would freedom look like for each of you?
You know, since Trinity's gone for so many times and Jacob is very quick to pass off the microphone, you know, I did get up to that point where he's talking about, you know, back in the days where there were less restrictions as far as, you know, you can move freely. You know, something like that is hard in today's society, of course. But at the same time, there's so many limitations on what I feel personally should not be limited. Rainwater, for example, I mean, it's illegal in most places to collect it. It can be used for many different things. I mean, it comes with a price tag. Of course, you know, plants and herbs, you know what I'm talking about. You know, just almost everything. Medicine, it's got a really high price tag on it. And it's just like things like that. I mean, even just the knowledge of things like that and the qualities of some of these things that could help people are just overly limited and you know, they're marketed, they're corrupt, corrupted to, I don't know. People are trying to own what is not theirs to own. And I mean, I guess that's been the story since 1492. You know, land is not meant to be owned, just like rainwater. But somehow people have managed to put a price on water, which is like beyond me. But, you know, that's ideally free would be not having to worry about those limitations. I understand limitations where, of course, it's to help protect people, protect, you know, those who are using it. But I feel like some limitations and price tags aren't meant to protect us. It's meant to protect people higher up, you know. And the cat, yes, the cat. Hope that makes sense.
So I hope that the freedom that people get from listening to this story is the freedom to question and to wonder. This story is creating a different narrative than what we have been taught in our history classes. I hope that when they walk away from it, it has planted a seed that will grow into not only acknowledging the history of the land, but looking at the land in a different way and seeing themselves in a different way as a steward of the land and not a property owner. You know, we are here to take care of the land, not to use it and abuse it. For my own definition of freedom, I have a firm belief that I did not create my own freedom. My freedom is created by the generation that came before me. The things that I'm allowed to do now and have the freedom to do only happened because my mom worked day and night to be able to provide, and my dad slaved away at school so that he could achieve his dreams, so that he could open doors for me and my brothers, in the same way that, you know, every generation past that. So when I think about freedom currently, the freedom that I'm thinking about is the doors that I am opening and the weeds that I'm cutting down in the jungle for my nieces and my nephews and those future generations. So I think the world would do a lot of healing if we think about our freedom in the perspective of creating freedom for the next generation of people, and for the people that you love. We have to do it for each other so that we all can have a piece of freedom.
Yeah. To kind of come off of what Trinity is saying, I feel, okay, this is how my mind works. So I think in like these word analogies, okay? I feel like freedom is the privilege and ability to walk on the bones of our ancestors. Like check this out, right? Like when you walk on the beach and you're walking on the shore, naturally you will sink into the sand, right? Like a few inches, an inch, whatever. But when you walk on the broken shells, and I say broken purposefully, right? When you walk on these broken shells, it's easier. You know, it might hurt, it might cut you, right? But ultimately it's easier for you to walk that path, yeah, to take that journey. So I feel like for me to define freedom is very difficult, but I will say that because of not just my ancestors, but Trinity and Ty's ancestors, I recognize the privilege to just walk that trail, yeah? You know, I recognize the history of emotion, the pain that I walk that trail. I see nothing honoring the Lenni-Lenape, right? So even though I'm not indigenous to the land, I repeat myself again that it fills me with this rage. You know, I don't want to learn about this colonial history. I learned about it already, forcefully, you know? So, and that's another thing, right? In terms of freedom, how we learn. Because I didn't want to learn that history. I recognized the abuse in these colonizers, right? So I wouldn't study for those tests growing up. They give me an F. What you want me to say? Yeah, they committed genocide. They stole that, you know? And they want me to, my teachers wanted me to glorify that, right? I'm not gonna glorify that. So that's what I mean by, in my ability to switch up and change, I wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for the bones of my ancestors, if I couldn't walk that, you know? So, yeah.
Thank you for that analogy. It almost is like a parable, Jacob, and I think it's so strong, so powerful. And the last thing I'll say is that Jacob does write about the things that you do see on the trail, you know, when you're not at the waterfront or amidst, you know, the trees, is that you see a number of correctional facilities. And that continues to be the legacy of our country in this time. Jacob, you want to say something? Go for it.
Yeah, Trinity, do you remember when we were talking? I'm sorry, Kate, just real
No,
quick.
please,
Yeah,
please. Go for it.
Trinity, remember when we were talking about that? And you said it, man. We're like, yo, the water's right here. And the folks that are in there, they're just several feet away from water. And then Trinity was like, yo, they're several feet away from life.
Yeah, it's
You
a
know?
cage.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so that really stuck with me. It still sticks with me.
Yeah, and I think it's a really poignant and painful part of your story. And I think your story brings so much hope, but it also holds that rage, and that rage that is part of the history that we're standing on, and thinking about how that history is painful. Those shells cut your feet, but there's a reason why that happens. Really ties it all together. So thank you so much for that, Jacob. We have a couple minutes left. If anyone has a question, please feel free to write it in the chat. That's at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we can take one or two questions. Our first question comes from Adrian Mackey, collaborator on this incredible project, asking, why are you guys so awesome? And I have the same question, because this has been a really, really powerful discussion. So thank you again for being here and being so generous. I think amidst the rage and the painfulness of that history, to show up and be willing to talk about it and to generously share that with other people is like beyond in so many ways.
Well, I want to say thank you to all of you guys. This has been absolutely a wonderful experience. Jacob, you are so creative, and your story touched me so deeply. It is so moving, and I'm so excited for people to be able to share that feeling. And I think that, it will connect, your story will connect people, because they'll be able to share that feeling, and it will be a feeling that many people haven't had to experience. And I am just so happy this has been able to happen. And I think this conversation was wonderful. We talked so much about the rage, and the rage, intergenerational rage is always seen as taboo, like we're not allowed to be upset. But if we create spaces like this where we can acknowledge the rage and accept the rage, it allows space for healing. People get so touchy and feely about being upset or hearing something that, is disturbing to them about what actually happened in history. But if we talk about it and we allow ourselves to heal, our healing moves forward to the next generation. And maybe they're a little less angry and they have a little bit less to worry about. So thank you for creating this space.
Yeah, our pleasure.
A few things. The first I want to mention is it was emphasized, our rage, and sometimes the majority and opposite of the minority get the brunt end of it. And not saying it's without necessity, but there are also, like with what's going on in the world today with the whole Black Lives Matter movement versus All Lives Matter or whatever, and it kind of brings out a lot of radical racism. But on the same side, same coin, different side, I mean, I can think of a bunch of white friends, since we're bringing race into it, that would punch a racist white person in the mouth for saying anything disrespectful. And being the program coordinator of our tribal nation, we get to, with the help of Trinity, of course, we get to meet a lot of people whose primary concern is to help us. So I don't want to say it makes up for all the wrongdoing, but to be able to meet hundreds of people who just want to do for us and try to make good on what the wrong that their ancestors did to us, I think is very admirable. Second thing, I would also like to thank you guys for pulling me in on this. Like I said, we do a bunch of programs all the time. And so when we get contacted, it's just like, oh, it's just another project or just another program. It's kind of like the same song and dance. And but there are always those few that are just like will forever change the way you look at things and just change you as a person. And this is one of them. Probably among the top of those that I think I stepped into not knowing what I was getting myself into and walking out like, wow, this is flipping amazing. Another one would actually be the person who put me in contact with Adrienne in the first place, which would be Danya, for the outlet dance project that she did, and that itself was amazing. I mean, I can't wait to do it again. But I think Trinity was with me with that too. It's Trinity, myself, my wife, which is the daughter of the tribe, and our current, well at the time, reigning princess. And again, it was just one of those things like we just got this time slot. We get there at this time. We have to do this, and then we go. And it was just like when you get there, and just like with this, you step into it, and just you walk out totally different. I mean, I was amazed with all the cultures that she pulled in for this project, and we weren't just performers; we were also spectators, and it's just like we're learning and teaching at the same time. And I think that's kind of what stands out to me at all times. And I think this is one of those things that we also just,
Well, thank you, Ty. And I think that's a huge testament to Adrienne Mackey and the Swim Pony team, the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, Toaster Lab, and Michael Kiley. It's truly like it takes a village. It took a huge community to be able to put this together. And I can't wait for all of our listeners and viewers to be able to experience it themselves. starting next week on Tuesday, September 16th. So thank you all for joining us here, and we'll go ahead and close out tonight's program with another performance from Ty.
You need that one? What do you need? Yeah, give me 5 minutes. Get out of the camera, child. My time. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, ya, ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, hey. Ya, hey, ya, ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, oh, ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, ah, ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, ah, ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, hey. Ya, hey, ah, ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, ah, ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey. Ya, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today in conversation. And we look forward to seeing you out on the trails next week. Thank you.
Anishi.
Anishi.